Are we truly alone? Or do we share this very planet with other sentient beings? Watching. Waiting. Are angels and demons standing right beside us at this moment in an alternate dimension we can't quite touch? Was there a great reset? And if so, was it orchestrated by ancient secret societies? And why? Why did so many of our oldest buildings end up buried beneath the earth? Grab a drink, pull up a seat, and come sit with me by the fire as we uncover the strange, the hidden, and the forbidden on Fireside Conspiracies. Hey everyone, welcome back into Fireside Conspiracies. This is Nick, your host, and I'm excited to jump back into our Secret Society series with Part 2, The Owl of Minerva Awakens. Now, we've got a lot to unpack here by the fire, so grab your drinks and your snacks and pull up a seat while I give a quick recap of Part 1, The Count, the Saint, and the Knight. If you haven't been to that fire yet, you may want to check it out first, just to get up to speed. Or you can always double back after we're done here and check it out as a prequel. Okay, here we go. On the last episode, we peered into the origins of the mysterious Knights Templar. How through careful planning and subterfuge, they rose from simple knights to the most powerful order Europe had ever known. A 200-year reign that saw most of the European elite indebted to them until finally, through the ingenuity of the French King Philip, their leaders were arrested, persecuted, and ultimately put to the flame. Yet from that inferno rose the curse of the Grand Master, not just on the king and the pope, but their kingdoms as well. A curse that echoes through the ages. Historians say that this was the end for the vaunted knights, and that anything we see now is just an imitation for entertainment. But persistent legends whisper a different story. That the Templar fleet sailed to safety, just escaping the long reach of the king and the pope, fortifying themselves in the shadows, never forgetting their betrayal, and establishing a new creed, the destruction of the French monarchy and the papacy. So, for this episode, we'll start with a question. And that question is, were the knights alone? Or were other groups feeling the pressure also? The truth was, PR-wise, it was a disaster for several orders. The public condemnation of the Knights was like an earthquake that launches a tsunami, and the waves threatened to engulf the Masons, Priory of Sion, and even the Hashashins. The most important thing at the time was for each to protect their secrets and rituals, so in desperation they plunged themselves into the shadows. And for 4.5 centuries they existed as independent entities, each preserving its own incredible power and reach, passing those secrets and rituals from generation to generation. Until finally, in 1776, a Jesuit-trained professor of canon law enters the scene. He's well known as a philosopher of reason, advocate for enlightenment, and highly anti-religious, which some believe led him down occult paths. His name? Adam Weishaupt, and he's about to change the world forever. See, while with the Jesuits, Weishaupt had access to extremely rare books and scrolls. This allowed him to study the history of secret societies extensively. It's likely he viewed several Catholic orders and even the papacy itself in this light, and his own dealings had shown him that these groups weren't just some myth of ancient history. They were in fact alive and well. But he saw them at this point as rudderless, with no real direction anymore. So, he devised a plan. A dangerous, cunning plan to move into a new era and finally unite the clans. Trading on his own reputation, invitations were scripted in code and carried by Weishaupt's most trusted associates. Slowly, cautiously, the high councils of each order accepted the invitation. And on May 1st in Bavaria, we're told that deep in the forest, In the dead of night, under the light of a full moon, he brings together the Grand Masters of the four societies. Now, I'm Italian, and when I heard this, I couldn't help thinking of the New York Mafia and the heads of the five families. And in a way, this was like having the Genovese, the Gambino, Lucchese, Bonanno, and Colombo Dons all in one place. A little 18th century gabagool. But instead of discussing territorial boundaries and handling disputes like Luciano's commission did back in the 1930s, Weishaupt had the foresight to embrace the power of each and show them that if they would just come together, that power would be unstoppable. Individually, they had different value to the great mastermind. He combined the secret rituals of the Masons, the Priory's vast influential membership, the wealth, power, and military strength of the Templars, and the intoxicating dark assassination arts of the Hashashins. These things, along with his occult influence, would create a super society whose unblinking gaze would blanket the globe. His initial goals were to control the world's resources and its people, creating a new world order. Modest, right? He chose May 1st, a date loaded with ancient significance that many believe tied to the renewal, a celebration of the fertility goddess. Hidden Rites, a mystical celebration when witches believed the veil between worlds had thinned enough to contact the spirits. And possibly even the satanic calendar, which in some cases considered it a demonic high day. Isn't it interesting how often these spirits and demons, and even angels and aliens, almost sound interdimensional? But that'll be for another episode. We don't know the details of that meeting, but from that point on, the five fingers became one hand, and everything they did going forward was to further their united goals: revenge and world domination. Weishaupt was also instrumental in crafting their most iconic emblems, such as the Owl of Minerva. Now, why was this significant? Well, in ancient Greece, the Minervan owl was incredibly sacred to Athena, a goddess worshipped by more than 300,000 followers. And what was Athena a goddess of? Wisdom, strategy, oh yeah, and warfare. Or perhaps one you may be more familiar with, that the Masons were kind enough to put on our $1 bill. What they called a symbol of enlightenment, an incomplete pyramid, and floating above as the capstone, an all-seeing eye with light emanating in every direction. Their sight went out like a palantir, and he named them the Illuminati. Publicly, the name was said to come from the word Illuminatus and mean enlightened. But behind closed doors, we hear Weishaupt told his closest followers that the name was Luciferian in its true nature and meant holders of the light. According to accounts from the time, he presented the four Grand Masters with a doctrine of 5 means to dominate the world. First, to use money and sex bribery to gain control of high-ranking members of society, most importantly in government. Second, the Illuminati would infiltrate major colleges with their own professors and administrators who could identify and groom students they thought held the most potential to further their cause. Third, infiltrate the most influential government, religious, and financial institutions throughout the world. Fourth, develop a complete domination of the media so as to push any message to the masses, including eventually supporting a one world order as the only possible way to escape the devastating problems of a multinational world. And finally, initiate coups in all major governments, turning every person on Earth toward the all-seeing eye. By my count, at least 3 to 4 of those means are alive and well in the 21st century. But even with the memberships of the 4 orders, Weishaupt knew that expansion was critical to their success. They began with the 32nd degree Masons, using them to recruit through the widespread Masonic halls. Most prominently among the group was Baron Adolf Knigge. He was a highly skilled recruiter and organizer, and his efforts alone brought in hundreds to the new order. He helped Weishaupt implement many Masonic practices, such as their structure, rituals and degrees, and even using code names. For instance, Adam Weishaupt went by Spartacus, the famous Roman rebel. Carnegie was Philo, an ancient philosopher. Other prominent members also chose historical figures such as Ajax, a Greek hero of the Trojan War, Agathon, the Greek philosopher, and Tiberius. No, not the captain of the Enterprise, the Roman ruler. I guess that was an interesting choice of names by Roddenberry, though. But that's definitely for a different episode. Their headquarters was called Eleusis. Athens was used for Munich, and even their dates were said to be cryptically written. Curiously, only 2 months later, by coincidence or providence, the United States would form under possibly the greatest leader in modern history, President George Washington. And if any part of you thinks this is all just silly fantasy, I give you the words of the man himself. In 1798, about a year and a half after the president's second term had ended, the Reverend G.W. Snyder wrote to him with concerns that the Illuminati had infiltrated the American Masonic lodges. Washington had been a dedicated Mason, but with the war and then the weight of the presidency, he understandably hadn't had a lot of time to drop into the lodge for a pint. Washington's abridged response, quote, "I have heard much of the nefarious and dangerous plan and doctrines of the Illuminati, but never saw the book until you were pleased to send it to me. The fact is, I preside over none, nor have I been in one more than once or twice within the last 30 years. I believe, notwithstanding, that none of the lodges in this country are contaminated with the principles ascribed to the Society of the Illuminati." End quote. Then in a later correspondence he clarifies, quote, "It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more truly satisfied of this fact than I am. The idea that I meant to convey was that I did not believe that the lodges of Freemasons in this country had, as societies, endeavored to propagate the diabolical tenets of the first, or pernicious principles of the latter, if they are susceptible of separation." End quote. Man, your boy could write. Okay, in other words, Washington is saying he accepts that the Illuminati and Jacobin ideas had spread somewhat in the U.S., but he firmly rejected the notion that organized Freemasonry here was involved in promoting them, at least to that point. But let's not stop at letters from the past. Rumors of revenge echo even louder. The Jacobins he referenced were a dominant, radical political faction that had flared up in Paris. While they did advocate for a republic to replace the monarchy, they pushed highly destructive ideas like direct democracy, which basically just means majority rule, virtue through terror, which is exactly what it sounds like, and de-Christianization, something that, up until doing this research, I didn't even know was a word. Although that one's pretty self-explanatory too. Not a lot of room for tolerance with the old Jacobins. Now, understand that the French Revolution was in its final stages, and it was widely speculated that the Jacobins, in league with the Templars, were finally taking the last step in their long-standing vendetta against the French monarchy. It's possible that the die for Marie Antoinette's beheading could have been cast by King Philip more than 450 years before she was even born. Multiple accounts tell us that when Louis XVI was executed, a Freemason dipped a cloth in the king's blood and declared, "Jacques de Molay, you are avenged." You can understand now why Snyder was worried. He feared the same playbook was coming to America. And don't get me wrong, I'm not defending any monarchist system. I'm just saying concerns that the New World was in danger of being contaminated may have been pretty reasonable. The order grew to over 3,000, which brought unwanted outside attention, especially from the Jesuits. Now, we'll probably dive more into the Jesuits in another episode. There is certainly plenty there to look at. But here's some quick context to help you understand why they were so alarmed. They were founded in 1540 by Ignatius of Loyola, a former soldier who had had a dramatic spiritual conversion. During the Protestant Reformation, Pope Paul III approved them as the Church's shock troops to counter the rising Protestant ideology. Like most elite orders, they took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. But that obedience was directly to the Pope. They became the most highly educated, disciplined, and politically savvy order in all of Catholicism. Jesuits ran schools and universities, worked deep into royal courts as advisors and confessors, and mastered the arts of debate, science, and even espionage. If they still don't sound familiar, maybe some of their schools will. Georgetown University, Boston College, St. Louis University, Santa Clara, San Francisco, Marquette, Creighton. That might sound like an NIT bracket to college basketball fans, but those are major universities spread across the U.S. By the 18th century, they had become the most powerful faction of the church. So, understandably, they weren't thrilled about what may be seen as one of their own, creating an army to destroy their beloved papacy. It was such a problem in Bavaria, the birthplace of the Illuminati, that the Jesuits went on the offensive. Likely working with Duke Theodore, they banned all unauthorized secret associations, societies, and brotherhoods. And why did the Duke have so much power? He was an elector of Rome, meaning he was one of a handful of princes who elected the king of the Holy Roman Empire. We forget that up until just 1806, when Napoleon finally dissolved it, that was still a thing. Considering this whole adventure started back at the beginning of the 12th century, that's not so long ago. So by 1790, the order appears to go underground. But rather than fleeing like the Templars so many centuries before, it almost seems planned, or at least beneficial for them to step out of the light, settle into the shadows, and create a more approachable face. Historians like to point to this as the end of the Illuminati, but what do we see today? Masonic lodges can be found in every major city across the world. The Knights Templar sit as the highest order of the York Rite of Freemasonry. We have countless stories of potentially dark secret rituals held even in the 21st century. And remember, Washington's exchange with Reverend Snyder was 7 years after the Duke's final edict allegedly ending the order. That doesn't sound like they went away at all. Now, does that mean the average Mason or Shriner you might know is sitting on secret knowledge or helping to usher in the end of the world? No. Most Masons these days are concerned about the same things as everyone else. Family, security, attaining food and shelter, and finding their place in this world. In the end, it's about all any of us can do. But the upper levels include the most powerful people in the world, and in large part remain secret even now in the digital age. Billionaires who are interested in population control, promoting globalist principles, and building massive underground bunkers. Kind of like the Denver airport, but that'll be for another episode. In spite of a powerful mainstream media, legends continue to persist that the Priory has used their extensive elite membership to move and shape the world we live in. Now, the Priory is complicated, and we'll dive deeper into them at some point. Controversy around Pierre Plantard in the 60s and some potential forgeries need to be looked at. But it's pretty fair to speculate that a secret organization as powerful as the Priory, whose elite members prefer to remain in the shadows, would be perfectly fine with publicly debunking proof of their own existence and influence. It's not much of a stretch to speculate that the Priory was probably pretty pissed at Plantard, and could have been the very ones to discredit him. It may sound cliche at this point, but never forget the words of the great 19th century French poet Charles Baudelaire. Or maybe you'll remember them better from Kaiser Soze. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. But in short, the Priory were created by the Merovingian monarchy to protect the lineage of Jesus. See, they believed that the Christ had a child, and that his bloodline survived in the Merovingians, making them the rightful head of the church. This isn't a theory I align with, but remember, something doesn't have to be true. It just has to be believed. Let's say, for instance, that hypothetically, the devil, whatever that is, doesn't actually exist. That fact would have no impact on devil worshippers or what they might do. In the same token, if enough people believe that the Merovingians are in fact the true bloodline of Jesus, that's going to inspire an unparalleled level of devotion. So, forgive me if I don't just write off the Priory. Now, obviously the papacy is founded on Peter, so you can see why this would be a point of contention for both. Their membership list reads like a who's who of history. Leonardo da Vinci, Sir Isaac Newton, Victor Hugo, and even Nicholas Flamel, the famous alchemist who was alleged to have created the Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life. And Nick, if you're listening, thanks for stopping by. Tell Saint Germain I said hey next time you see him. The list goes on, but you can see the elite theme of the membership. They've even been implied to have used their political connections to shape modern Europe, possibly through one of their most influential members, French President Francois Mitterrand. We have to remember that after the downfall of the French monarchy, there was a power vacuum, and no one was better positioned to fill that void than the Illuminati. Though Francois was notoriously radical in his youth, he presented himself as a pragmatic socialist leader. His scandals and secretive nature, though, paint us a different picture, with multiple affairs and using anti-terrorism as a front to wiretap anyone he deemed a threat. That sounds a little too familiar these days. Francois was also instrumental in transforming the highly successful European economic community into the overbearing and oppressive European Union we know today. And the U.S. seemingly hasn't escaped this influence either, as the Federal Reserve is believed to have been founded by the originators of modern banking, the Templar branch of the Illuminati. Not to mention, most, if not all, of our presidents are rumored to have descended from the royal Merovingian line. As we can see, infiltration has long been the preferred method of the Illuminati. And KGB files recovered after the downfall of the Soviet Union by brave investigative journalists bear further evidence. It seemed that with France now under their control, they were turning their attentions to an all too familiar friend, the Vatican. Communications between high-ranking KGB officials connected Weishaupt with Joseph Stalin and Nikita Khrushchev. A quote from one of those communiques via British translation, quote, "Our mission to place agents within the walls of the Vatican is a goal that the founder Weishaupt talked about 200 years ago. It is something that has been attempted through the years by both Stalin and Khrushchev with no success, but I believe we can finally do it this time." End quote. Man, something like that makes you wonder what else is hiding in those archives. Now, you have to ask yourself, what reason would the Russians have to care about the Vatican in the middle of the Cold War? While there had been off and on tensions throughout the years, overall the Russian Catholic Church fell right in line with Rome. Yes, it's true that the KGB wanted in everywhere, but to so blatantly connect their modern political leaders with the Church and Weishaupt, going so far as to call him the founder, and in the context of fulfilling a 200-year-old goal, that seems to have strong implications of what Weishaupt called Step 3, infiltrate government organizations. It appeared that the KGB was going to war with the city on the Seven Hills, and their declaration was in the name of the Illuminati. Kings have attacked them. Popes have persecuted them. Governments have exorcised them. Yet time after time, we sense that the secret order has just moved their hand again. From the masterminding of Weishaupt and Carnegie, through the Masonic temples in every region, to the modern-day European Union and beyond, their influence feels undeniable. And we have to ask, was the Vatican able to shield itself? Or did it finally succumb to the long-time vendetta of the Illuminati? But that is a question for another time. As always, I want to thank you all so much for stopping by the fire to relax and joining the adventure. If you're enjoying the journey so far, think of sharing the link with a friend who's into this kind of thing also. I'm not going to tell you about like buttons and all that. You know where they are. But I will say, if there are topics you're interested in, be sure to drop those in the comments. Remember, if there's something you really want to know about, do your own research. And never sell yourself short. Take care out there. God bless.